Hello and welcome to Licensing Basics Academy. Step number 7, the deal. So let's get started. The first interest. So if you're to this step, that would be assuming that you start to have interest in your product. So after a company shows interest in your product, the first thing they want to know is what your intentions are for the product. So they're going to ask you some questions. So first off, they're going to know, what do you want? And typically there are 3 options in this question. They are license the product for royalties. So this is what we teach, and this is typically what most of our students are looking for, is to license their product idea in exchange for royalties. The second thing that you could want is to sell the product outright. So that means that you're looking just to sell off the patent or the rights to the product for one lump sum to a company. And third, you might be wanting to venture the product. And if you're venturing the product, that means that you're developing and you're manufacturing, and then therefore you'll be wholesaling the product to the company. So sometimes when you approach a company and you show them your sell sheet, it might not be clear on what your intentions are to them. So these are the 3 things that they might think that you would be wanting to do with the product. So make sure you be clear to them that what your intentions are. After that, you're going to need to know exactly what you want in a deal. So the first step to a deal is knowing what you want and know what you're willing to settle for. So remember, you're going to be negotiating with the licensee, that's the company, and if you don't know what you want, it makes this process much more difficult. In addition to that, you need to know what they want. So what are the intentions for the company? So after you have an idea of what you want, you need to find out what the licensee's intentions are. Sometimes they might want to buy the product outright. Maybe they want to purchase the product at wholesale and sell it for retail. They don't want to manufacture your product. And so you need to find out what their intentions are and to better help you move this process along. This is best done by setting up a phone call and to talk to someone in person about this. Some of the questions that are very beneficial for you to know is about the company is, first off, do you need an exclusive? So this is a question that you would ask the company. You'd want to know, do they want exclusive rights to your product? Exclusive rights means that they are the only ones able to sell your product. Exclusivity. Or do they want non-exclusive? So that's the first question. Second is, do you have other products that you've licensed? So you want to know, does this company have experience licensing products? If they do not, then you'll know in the back of your head that there's going to be some hand-holding and some kind of coaching along the way to help them through the process. If they do, if they have licensed other products, then the next question would be, what's your standard royalty rate? A lot of times when a company is familiar with licensing and they're licensing a lot of deals, they have a standard royalty rate that they're used to paying. Now that's negotiable, but a lot of times it's at least a starting point. So if you can get them to say what their standard royalty rate of what they pay out, then it gives you a starting point on where to negotiate. For example, if they say that they typically pay out 7%, well, great. You know that that's the bottom, and you could potentially license your product for that much or more if you're able to negotiate a little higher rate. So it's a starting point. So which territories do you currently sell in? So knowing where their products sell is very beneficial too. How many stores do you distribute to? Knowing what their distribution. Do they sell to 50 stores or 5,000 stores? So that's great to know. And finally, how long would you like an agreement to last for? So how many years would they like this agreement to last for? Typically, probably 3 to 5 year licensing agreement, and most of the time there's going to be options for them to relicense after that time is up. So understanding licensing terms. So next we're going to cover understanding the different terms in licensing. First off, everybody wants to know royalty rate. So a royalty rate is a payment made by one party, usually the licensee, which is also the company, to another that owns a particular asset, the licensor or the inventor in our case, for the rights to use or sell that asset. Most common is a percentage of sales, but also could be a price per unit sold. Now, there's not particularly an average in royalty rates. If I had to say an average, I would say 5%, but that average is different in every industry. It's different in every scenario. There's, different products have more leverage than other products. For example, if you have a product that you've been selling for years and you have granted patents on it and you have trademarks and copyright, you have all this stuff in this big package, then you have more leverage to be able to get a higher royalty rate because there is less risk for the company. It's more of a turnkey product that they could license versus a product that you thought of. Maybe you just have a virtual prototype. The development hasn't been done. There's a lot of, you don't have a granted patent. So you have less leverage and there's more risk for a potential licensee to license your product. So naturally, the percentage will probably be lower. So as you can see here, on a low end, 2 to 3%. That average is 4 to 6, and that high is 7 to 10. Now, I've seen royalty rates in the 1% area, and I've seen royalty rates well above 10%, but it all depends on many factors. Royalty calculation. So how your royalty is calculated is more important than the rate that you receive. Is it on gross sales or net sales? If it is on net sales, you need to know what deductions are they using to get the net amount. So would you rather a royalty of 7% on net or 5% on gross? Let's take a look at that. So this is just an example, but if you have a product that sells, let's say it sells $100,000 worth of product, and the expenses that the company is recording is, let's just say it's $40,000 of expenses. So you take $100,000, you minus the expenses of $40,000, and you get a net sales of $60,000. So this is a very basic example, but it'll give you an idea of how this works. So at a net royalty, you have $60,000 net times your 7% royalty. So that is a royalty check for $4,200. Now on the flip side, if that royalty was based off gross, at a 5% gross, you take the $100,000 of gross sales times 5%, you have a $5,000 royalty check. So that's where a 5% of gross would be better than a 7% of net. And obviously the net, it all depends on what the deductions are. So royalties paid from net sales are common, but make sure to know what they're deducting. For example, it is generally acceptable for a net sales to include deductions for shipping, freight, taxes, credits, returns, and discounts made at the time of sale. So those are fairly common. Those are in a lot of royalty deals, licensing contracts. It is less common and less desirable for you, the inventor, to have them include deductions for sales commissions, debts, uncollectible accounts, promotions, marketing, and advertising. If you sign a licensing deal and they are putting in promotions and marketing and advertising and all sorts of things, that they could basically turn that net sales to zero. You know, if they had a product that sold $100,000 and they had $99,000 in expenses, then you would get your royalty rate off $1,000 of net sales, and that wouldn't be a great thing to do. So it's more important to understand how your royalty is calculated than what the percentage rate is. Performance guarantee. A performance guarantee protects you if the other party, so the licensee, the company, buries your invention, or does not do enough to market or sell it. So for example, let's say you get a licensing contract and it's a 15% royalty and you're thrilled to death, but there is no performance guarantees. So there is no guarantee that they have to sell any amount of product. They don't have to put your product into stores at any specific time. So there is no guarantee you're ever going to get paid. So a performance guarantee is very important. Some things a performance guarantee is going to cover is a specific time to bring to market. So you might, if your product is going to require development and manufacturing, and it's not all figured out, then you might want to give them a little bit of time. So for example, you might give them 1 year to bring the product to market. And if they don't bring it to market within that period of time, then the contract is void, and so you would get the product license back. Minimum sales / unit guarantee. So that is where they would guarantee that they would sell X amount of sales or X amount of units per given time. So it might be per year, per quarter. It just depends. So that means that they guarantee. So for example, if you had a $100,000 sales guarantee or a $100,000 minimum royalty guarantee, then you would be guaranteed that amount of money per, call it year, whatever you set it at. And if they do not pay that amount of money in the year, then you would get the license back. So very important. And obviously putting the consequences of if the minimums are not met. So for example, if the minimums are not met, you could terminate the license, or you could terminate the exclusivity. So for example, if they have an exclusive worldwide rights to your product and they do not meet the minimums, then you would have the option to terminate their exclusivity, and you could then you would grant them what's called a non-exclusive, meaning that you could then go out and find other companies, other licensees, to license your product in addition to the first company. So that brings us to exclusive or non-exclusive. So exclusive license means that one licensee, so one company, has the sole right to the asset. So they're the only ones that can sell or make your product. Non-exclusive means that the licensor, the inventor, can grant a license to multiple companies, multiple licensees. Territory. Worldwide rights or specific geographic area rights. So this is where it's important to know where your potential licensee is currently selling at. So if for example, if you license your product to a company that only sells in the United States, there's no reason to give them worldwide rights, because there are plenty of other countries out there that that you could license your product idea for. So if a company only sells in the U.S., then you would find a company that licenses to a company for the U.S. Then you would find a company that licenses to Europe. So you could kind of cut out the pieces of the pie for your licensing deal. Category. So this is another way to cut out a piece of the pie for a company. So for example, let's say you come up with a new squeaky device mechanism that makes a squeaky sound. This could be used in a dog toy or maybe a kid's toy. So you could license it to a pet supply company and also to a toy company. Now, assuming that the pet supply company doesn't want to sell toy products for kids, this would be a perfect scenario. Improvements. So make sure you own any future improvements made to your product, including any forms of intellectual property like trademarks, copyrights, and design patents. Basically, any intellectual property concerning your invention now and into the future you should own. Term of an agreement. So the term of agreement is the length of time that a license is valid for. This protects the licensor, so the inventor, should the value of the license increase or market conditions change. It also preserves enforceability by ensuring that no license extends beyond the term of this agreement. Reports and auditing. Licensors, so the inventors, right to receive royalty/sales reports and to ask for an audit if the licensor feels there is a discrepancy in the report. So this is a touchy scenario. You want to have this in a contract because you want to be able to have the rights to audit their books. Now, however, know this: if you choose to exercise this right, you will be probably upsetting them because basically you're showing that you don't trust the company. So if you choose to exercise this right, you need to have a good reason to do it. And one good reason to do it would be, for example, if you were getting paid for, let's say a company had worldwide exclusive rights and you were getting paid, your royalty checks were coming from US sales only. And you knew that in your reports. And all of a sudden you found out from an outside source that your product is being sold in Europe. And your reports don't show any compensation for any product sold in Europe. That would be a good reason to audit because they are showing you the sales in the US and you have reason to believe that the product is being sold in Europe, and that would be a good reason to audit their books. Infringement. So you want to address how to handle any intellectual property infringement by third parties and how a settlement would be divided between the licensor and the licensee. So for example, if you have a patent and a third party, so a separate company, decides to copy your invention and they start selling it, you need to have in your contract, for one, who fights that. So who hires the lawyers to fight that? Most of the time, it is the licensee. Sometimes it is a combination of the licensee and the licensor. And obviously, if there's a settlement, how would that settlement be divided? Would it be a 50-50? Would it be just a portion of your royalties? Usually it's greater than your royalties. So you want to address that in the contract. Advance against royalties. So advance against royalties is a payment made by the licensee to the licensor at the start of the period of licensing, usually immediately upon contract or on delivery of the property being licensed. And this is to be offset against future royalties. So an advance on royalties is important because what it does, it shows that the company has some skin in the game. Basically, it's a check to you at the beginning of the licensing, on the beginning of the license, and it's non-refundable. So for example, if the company doesn't produce your product and they default on maybe one of your performance guarantees, then you would keep the advance against royalties. If the company pays you an advance and then starts selling the product, then that advance is deducted from your future sales. So for example, if you're paid $5,000 advance, then you will not receive a royalty check until you have made at least $5,000 in royalties owed to you. Termination. How a license can and will be terminated. This is important because you need to be able to get out of a licensing deal if things go sideways. So understand how to get out if a licensing deal does not work out. You do not want a company sitting on your product and you have your hands tied. So legal advice. So I have to say this, I'm not an attorney. So none of the information that I provide in this presentation should be taken as legal advice. I recommend that you discuss any contract concerns and legal issues that you may have with a qualified attorney. So thanks for listening and hope you enjoyed it.